I didn't actually set out with the intention to write a book on Imam Ali alayhi salam. What happened is that I started just to write a series of articles for 2 different conferences. And when I'd finished those conference papers, it was suggested to me here at the Institute that I could put those 2 conference papers together and enlarge upon them, add 1 extra chapter, and then I have a book on Imam Ali. So I didn't start out by thinking I must write a book on Imam Ali. I just responded to 2 invitations to give papers at conferences, and I enjoyed writing the papers and doing the research for them so much that the idea of putting them together, adding another chapter, was quite appealing, and it made sense. And then it suddenly struck me that there is no book in the English language that really engages seriously with the personality, with the thought, with the influence of Imam Ali on the Islamic intellectual tradition. So I was then inspired, as it were, by the idea given to me here by the Institute, by Kutub Qasim, in fact, the editor here. He was the one who first suggested that we have the makings of a book, because I never would have had the audacity to think that I could write a book on Imam Ali, because, you know, there are experts in Imam Ali who have spent decades of their life immersed in his thought, immersed in the natural balagha, in his sayings in the Ghur al-Hikam, whose knowledge is encyclopedic, and mine is very, very limited compared to those people. I'm very much a student in this area, so I wouldn't have had the courage or the audacity or even the, one might say, the presumptuousness. Implicitly, it's a kind of presumption to write a book when you're not an expert on that person. So I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been given to me as an encouragement on the basis of these 2 conference papers, one on justice in the letter that the Imam wrote to Malik al-Ashtar, and the other one on Dhikrullah for a conference in Sarajevo on the influence of the Ahl al-Bayt. So when I wrote those 2 papers, and they were well received, I thought I would take this suggestion seriously and then put together this book based on the 3rd chapter, which was something written purely as an introduction to the spirituality of Imam Ali, and that was the subtitle, Justice and Remembrance, and the subtitle, Introducing the Spirituality of Imam Ali. So that's really how the package came together. As I said, the individual chapters were written for different audiences. The first chapter on justice was written for academics in Iran. It was a conference in Iran, Imam Ali and justice and his teachings in this domain. And so I was writing it with the Iranian academic audience in mind. And then when I expanded it for the book, I was trying to make it more accessible to a Western audience, to a general readership, but also to try and make that chapter in particular on justice a contribution to the discourse in the West on the nature of ethics, morality, and the source for morality and ethics in philosophy and in metaphysics. So I tried to broaden out this chapter to make it correspond to some of the needs and requirements of ethical discourse in philosophical West. There's both an academic audience and then general readership, an informed readership. Then across the 3rd chapter on justice, well, actually I will cut that and just stop there. And as regards the 3rd chapter, I made it more of an attempt to engage with the spiritual readership in the West, those who are looking for answers to questions about the nature of the ultimate reality, remembrance of the ultimate reality. So that was moving away from the narrow academic audience to a wider readership. And so the initial chapter, the number 1 on introducing the spirituality, that I tried to show how both justice and remembrance come together in an overall framework defined by the spirit, what the spirit itself means according to Imam Ali. So that's really how the 3 chapters were composed in my mind and then elaborated for the sake of the book. Partly because academics and scholars in the West were too concerned with Imam Ali's role in the articulation of the Shia versus Sunni debate. And they kept on thinking it's too difficult, it's too complicated, it's too polemical, the historical sources are too tendentious. So they always looked at Imam Ali from the point of view of his role in the polemics, but in saying he is extremely influential as regards his teachings, as regards his personality, which was accepted as a great one, not just by the Shia but by the Sunnis as well, and by the Sufis. So I think part of the reason is that he was regarded too much in theological terms or political terms or ideological terms, and not enough in specifically intellectual and spiritual terms. And why that's been the case, I have no real answer. Why people have shied away from engaging with his thought in the Western world, I have no idea. So I'm just glad that, alhamdulillah, we can start the ball rolling in this direction. Well, justice in the divine nature implies that everything is in its proper place. That is the universal definition of justice given by Imam Ali. That justice is that you put each thing in its proper place, from the divine to the human, at all these different levels, to put each thing where it belongs. Now, in the divine reality, the principle of justice implies that everything in the divine is exactly where it should be. There's a perfect harmony among all of the divine qualities and attributes, the qualities of Jalal and Jamal, whether God is defined in terms of his rahmah or in terms of his ghadab, his anger. You have a perfect balance and a harmony and an integration. Everything in the divine order is where it should be. Now, in order to translate that divine conception and reality of justice into a human context, we have to make the effort on the human plane to put everything in its proper place, to make the human level as perfect a reflection as possible of the heavenly and the divine levels. So this is why Imam Ali says in one of his many sayings on the nature of justice that the first principle of putting things right in this world is that you put right what is between you and God. If the relationship between the individual soul and the divine reality is just, is in its proper place, then the person, the individual, is able to put a proper effort into making things on earth between human beings in their right place. So the justice vertically conceived is transcribed into justice horizontally spread. So it's the relationship between verticality and horizontality. Being just with God, the Imam says, be just with God and be just with the people. First it's the horizontal, first it's the vertical dimension in place, then the horizontal transcription, translation, the spread horizontally of that conception and the power that comes to you from the integral relationship with the divine justice. The Sufi orders, without exception, all of the Sufi tariqas, without exception, see their chain of affiliation coming from the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Imam Ali alayhi salam, then to other sheikhs or the imams themselves. There are different silsilas that give different branches, but essentially all of the silsilas in Sufism go from the Prophet to Imam Ali and then to other individuals. And even the Naqshbandi tariqa, which is often given as the exception that proves the rule, even the Naqshbandis, before the polemics with the Safavid Persians, when the Shia and the Sunni debate was very intense, the Naqshbandis gave their silsila primarily coming from the Prophet to Sayyidina Abu Bakr and then down to other masters. But that was at a time of polemics. Prior to that period, even the Naqshbandis said that our golden chain, our golden silsila, goes from the Prophet to the Imam, then through the Shiite Imams, only branching off at Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida. So all of the Sufi tariqas are united in the figure of Imam Ali at the summit, right beneath the Prophet, indicating one of the meanings of the saying of the Prophet, Ana madinatul ilm wa Ali babuha. I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. So this gateway to the prophetic knowledge, to the ilm of the Prophet, is particularly graphically expressed in the Sufi tariqas. You can see how he was the gateway to the knowledge that the Prophet possessed in his being. So just as Imam stands at the summit of all of these silsilas, he also stands at the summit of the elaboration of the doctrine of the invocation of the name of God, dhikrullah. He is the one who, after the Prophet, made clearer than anybody else among the companions of the Prophet what is the meaning of the remembrance of God. Why is the remembrance of God described in the Quran as greater than all other prayer? In Surah Ankabut we have this very important verse which says that Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar wala dhikrullahi akbar. Truly the prayer keeps you away from lewdness and iniquity. Wala dhikrullahi akbar. And the remembrance of God is greater. And in many of the verses of the Quran, the dhikrullah is given tremendous importance. الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ. Those who remember God standing and sitting and who are lying on their sides. It tells you to remember God khawfan wa tama'an, different modes of remembering God, in fear and in hope. And then in other places we have verses which describe the identity between the name of God and God himself. In the Surah Al-Muzammil we're told that the Prophet himself was addressed, Ya ayyuhal muzammil qumil layla illa qalila nisfahu aw inqus minhu qalila aw zid alayhi wa rattil al-Qur'ana tartila. And it goes on, Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila inna laka fi an-nahari sabhan tawila. And then it goes on, وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا. And remember or invoke the name of your Lord and devote yourself to this practice with total devotion. And the pronoun in إِلَيْهِ, تَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا, can go back to either the Rabb or the ism of the Rabb. So it means that the name of God and devotion to the name of God is devotion to God himself. There's an identity between the name and the named. What in Sufism is called, the formula is defined, al-ism huwa al-musamma. The name is the named. The name itself is identical with the object that it names. So when in the dhikrullah you are repeating the name of God continuously, that dhikrullah is devotion to God himself. And the Imam explains this doctrine very beautifully when he says, when you love something, you give yourself totally to remembering it. Lahija bidhikrihi. Man ahabba shay'an lahija bidhikrihi. He who loves something, Imam Ali says, will devote himself completely to mentioning it, to remembering it, to invoking it. And that is what the notion of dhikrullah contains, all of these ideas, to mention, to think of, to remember, to be recollected before, and to repeat with the tongue, to make your tongue moist with the remembrance of God. This is one of the hadiths of the Prophet where he said to someone who asked him, what should I do to be saved? And the Prophet said, make your tongue moist with the remembrance of God. Continuously remember God. And in one hadith the Prophet said, increase your dhikr so much, do so much dhikr that people will say to you, Majnoon, that he's mad. So the Prophet said, do it that much that people will tell you that you're mad. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam said that our Shia, our people who follow us, are the ones who do dhikr continuously. And he said his father, Imam Baqir, was always invoking God when he was walking, when he was sitting, when he was sleeping. Continuously the dhikr was happening in his heart and not just with his tongue. Now this dhikrullah takes us to the very quintessence of the Sufi spiritual method. All of the Sufis are agreed that the dhikrullah is at the center of their spiritual method. just as all the Sufis are agreed that Imam Ali is at the summit of their silsilas. Now this identity, this confluence as regards the silsilas in Imam Ali is of extreme importance. When I realized that it wasn't for nothing that the Sufis referred to Imam Ali as their Sheikh. The great Junaid al-Baghdadi, who himself was regarded as one of the founders of Sufism, he is quoted by Ali Hujwiri as saying that Imam Ali is Shaykhuna, our Shaykh, fil usul, as regards principles, wal bala, and as regards trials. And Hujwiri comments by saying that Al-Junaid referred to the usul because they are the doctrine, and to bala because it's the practice. It's one thing to have the doctrine of the higher reality, but can you live it? Can it be existentially galvanizing for your soul? Will it be part of your being and not just part of your thought? And that's why bala, the test, the trial, will you be up to what your mind tells you is the truth? Now, bringing together the doctrine of the truth and the experience of the trial means essentially remembering God. That is the way to translate doctrine into method, theory into practice. It's the dhikrullah, to give yourself to this practice totally. Now, Imam Ali says in one very important saying, which also indicates why dhikr takes us to the very heart of the Sufi endeavor. He says that you must remember God with a perfect remembrance. Dhikran kamilan, has to be kamil, complete, perfect. Then he says that that perfect dhikr is when your tongue and your heart are in harmony. That you don't want one thing but your tongue says another. What you are saying, Allah, Allah, in conformity with your heart, what your heart wants. That's kamil. But then he says, you will not attain the haqiqah of the dhikr, the spiritual reality of the dhikr, until you forget yourself in your remembrance. Hatta tansa nafsaka fi dhikrika. Only then will you attain the haqiqah of the dhikr, the spiritual reality of the remembrance of God will only be given to you when you have forgotten yourself in your remembrance. And that takes us to the Sufi conception of fana. Fana fi dhikr, to be extinguished, effaced in the remembrance of God, so that what is left in your soul is just the divine reality. Nothing of the human, relative, contingent dimension is left. It's been burned up in the fire of the remembrance of God. And that fana is what, of course, the Sufis aspire to, but they can't force themselves into a state of extinction. They have to just force themselves to do the invocation. It's through the invocation, the dhikrullah, that you can come closer to fana fillah, effacement in God, because the ism huwa al-musamma. And if your remembrance of God, your concentration on the name of God is so complete, intense and perfect, then the grace from God comes to eliminate your creaturely consciousness, give you a complete opening into the divine consciousness. It's like the drop of water is absorbed into the ocean. It no longer exists as a drop, but that water that it is in its essence is now one with the whole ocean. That's why fana and identity, essential identity, are so closely related. And this is the aim of all the Sufis, to become one with the supreme reality, but at the price of one's own specific reality. That's the Sufi path summed up in its most simple terms, and which the Imam, it's not just theory for the Imam when he said forget your soul in your dhikr, because he also experienced this fana. We know from a strongly authenticated incident that Abu Darda, one of the companions of the Prophet, found Imam Ali lying in a field and he thought he was dead. He touched his body, it was stiff like a piece of wood. And he ran to Sayyidatuna Fatima and he said, I commiserate with you, your husband is dead. And she said, no, he has not died. This state comes over him sometimes through the intensity of his khashya of Allah. His fear of God, his awe in the presence and the majesty of God is so great that sometimes he falls unconscious. And it's that unconsciousness of self which means pure consciousness of the transcendent self, the transcendent reality. So all of these things came together, you see, and I tried to express them in that final chapter to show how fana and baqa and dhikr and faqr come together in the Imam's teachings. And there are many other aspects of that chapter which help us to explain things such as why the Imams refer to themselves as the names of God. Why do the Imams say, Nahnu asma'ullah, we are the names of God? How can we understand it? We need Imam Ali's doctrine about the relationship between the ism and Allah Himself. There is in one respect identity, al-ism huwa al-musamma, but in the other respect, the ism and the sifat, the qualities of God, are only one with God in the essence. If they're considered apart from God's essence, they are to be negated. And this is what he says in sermon number 1, that he said the perfection of ikhlas is nafyu sifat anhu, to negate the qualities of God from the divine reality. Because of the shahada, the witness, the testimony of every sifa, that it is other than the mawsuf. And because of the testimony of every mawsuf, that it is other than the sifa. Meaning, the attribute is other than the object of attribution, and the object of attribution is other than the attribute. So we need this doctrine of Imam Ali as regards the relationship between the attribute and the essence to understand what the Imams meant when they said we are the names or the attributes of God. That's one of the areas in which doctrine and method, concept and experience are brought together very harmoniously in the teachings of Imam Ali. Well, I made an effort in the book to write from a point of view which in a sense is neither Shia nor Sunni, but which comprises both Shia and Sunni conceptions of Imam Ali, in the sense that I didn't take a point of view which was polemical or theologically defined. I asked myself the question, when the Prophet referred to Imam Ali as the gate to the city of knowledge, what is the essence of that knowledge? And that knowledge is neither Sunni, nor Shi'i, nor Sufi, nor even Muslim. That knowledge is knowledge as such. It's wisdom, it's hikmah. And hikmah is what the Prophet referred to as the lost camel of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he has a greater right to it. So Imam Ali's role within Islam as the gateway to the city of knowledge is a gateway to the city of knowledge, not such and such a knowledge. Not the knowledge that's defined as Shi'i knowledge or Sunni perspectives on Imam Ali, or even the Sufi ones exclusively. It is to say, where is the wisdom of Imam Ali? That wisdom which all Muslims would recognize as being wisdom. Where are the particular insights of Imam Ali in his sayings and in his teachings? Insights that will be recognized, appreciated, inshallah acted upon by Muslims of whatever denomination, and also by believers of all the religions, because the Christians and the Jews and the Buddhists and the Hindus would, I believe, be able to read this book and derive real confirmation of things that are in their own book, and also insights that are not perhaps found these days very commonly within those traditions. Because just as the Quran says that the Quran itself is a confirmation of all previous scriptures, and it's a guardian and a preserver of all previous scriptures. The verse says, Inna anzalna ilayka al-kitab bil-haqq musaddiqan lima bayna yadayhi min al-kitab wa muhaiminan alayh. The Quran says, we have revealed this Quran to thee, O Prophet, as with truth, as a musaddiq, as a confirmer of all the scriptures that came before it, and as a protector of all those scriptures. Now, just as the Quran refers to itself as a confirmer and a guardian over all previous scriptures, so Imam Ali's perspective can be seen as confirming and protecting the wisdom in all of those previous scriptures, all the previous traditions. Why? Because the Prophet told us in a hadith which is found in Sunni sources and in Shia sources. Imam Ali is with the Quran, and the Quran is with Imam Ali. Ma'a is the word he uses. Imam Ali is with the Quran is with Ali. They will never part from each other until they come to me at the Hawd, at the paradisal pool. So Imam Ali is like, as he said himself, the walking Quran. He is the talking Quran. He brings the Quran to life and he elaborates upon it, shows us the ta'wil of the Quran for all believers. Because one thing I've stressed in this book is all of the hadiths I use to talk about Imam Ali are hadiths that are found in Sunni sources as well as in Shia sources. All of them are found in highly authenticated Sunni sources, even ones which sometimes are surprising, such as the hadith which is transmitted on the authority of Sayyidina Abu Bakr himself, when he was staring at Imam Ali, and they said to him, "Why are you staring at him like that?" And he said, "I'm looking at him because I heard the Prophet say, an-nadharu ila wajhi Ali ibadah." I heard the Prophet say, looking at the face of Ali is worship. And this is a very mysterious saying, indicating the sanctified presence of Imam Ali, that presence through which the divine can somehow be intuited, can be glimpsed, because Imam Ali, as I said earlier, was effaced as regards his own particular identity. So the universal reality of God could flow through him and be a source of grace for all those who are around him. So in these ways I tried to show how Imam Ali's role and his presence and his teachings transcend the Shia-Sunni division, and it also transcends the distinctions between the religions. His perspective and his wisdom is wisdom as such. It's not such and such a Muslim wisdom or a Shia wisdom or a Sunni wisdom or a Sufi wisdom. It is wisdom as such, which is like the lost camel, our possession. It belongs to us because wisdom is something that belongs to each and every individual soul. We recognize it as being wise, and therefore we say we are one with that. We can only recognize it as wisdom if there's something wise in ourselves. We have to be wise to recognize wisdom. It kind of reminds us of what we are in our own essence. So Imam Ali has this intimate relationship with the wisest dimension of our soul. And that's why I think throughout these 1400 years of Islam, his message of ma'rifah, of irfan, of hikmah, has been so influential and so decisive in all of the intellectual traditions of Islam.